Okay, in this lesson we're going to talk about commonly misspelled words, how to identify them, and how to correct them. Now, there are a lot of different spelling rules and a lot of exceptions to those rules in the English language. So it's really going to be impossible to talk about every possible misspelling. But what we can do is talk about 5 common rules that will at least improve your chances of spelling some of those more difficult, commonly confused words, commonly misspelled words. Okay, so the first of those rules is the rule of adding suffixes. And the rule here says, if a word ends in E and the suffix, or in other words, the letters added to create a new word ending like ing, if those begin with a vowel, you drop the final E. So for example, take becomes taking, phone becomes phoning, bake is baked, love, lovable. Okay, and of course there's an exception, and that is be simply becomes being. That's the rule about adding suffixes. Now, if a word ends in a consonant plus a Y, you change the Y to an I and when adding the suffix. So for example, crazy would be crazier. Happy becomes happiest. So these words end with Y, you drop that Y and add an I. The exceptions to this rule are frying, crying, supplying. Those are a few exceptions. Okay, another part of this rule about suffixes is when you add full to the end of a word, you drop that second L. So joyful, it's one L, not two L's. It's joyful, not joyful with two. Harmful has just one L. Okay, the second rule is the whole IE versus EI thing. Okay, so you may remember the rhyme, place I before E except after C or when sounded like A, as in neighbor and way. So this rule tries to capture both the rule and the exceptions to the rule. But let's see how well when this rule actually works, this idea of placing I before E. So this works in the case of friend, niece, fiend, peace, believe, fierce, die, field. All of these hold true in this idea of I before E. But the idea of except after C, what does that look like? Things like receive, perceive, deceive, receipt, ceiling. All of these are exceptions when followed by C. Okay, or when sounded like A, as in neighbor and way. So in addition to neighbor and way, we have words like wait, slay, and feign. So there are some notable exceptions to this I before E rule. Being, either, and these are common words, you can see. These are not just obscure words that come up occasionally. These are some common words, and they are worth looking at. Either, society, weird, leisure, foreign. Okay, there's the third rule that we're going to look at is the one for doubling the final consonant. So if a word is just one syllable and ends in a consonant, you double the last letter when adding a suffix. So tag, tagging, flap, flapped. You see how that final consonant is doubled in each of these cases. And those words are one syllable words. For 2-syllable words that end with a single consonant, you double the final consonant if that syllable is stressed. So the word transmit, for example, that's a 2-syllable word, but that last part of it is the part that's emphasized. That's the stress part of it. So it's transmit, forget, embed. And these also follow that rule of doubling the final consonant. If the stress falls on the first syllable of a 2-syllable word, the final consonant is not doubled. So travel, you can hear how that stress is in the first part of the word. Travel, marvel. and in those cases you can see L is not doubled. Okay, rule number 4, making nouns plural. So most nouns are made plural simply by adding an S to the end. Rock becomes rocks, bed becomes beds. There is nothing too tricky about that. But if the noun ends in an S, Z, X, SH, CH, or two S's, then you have to add an ES. You can see the examples here. Boss becomes bosses, fax is faxes. We add an ES after those. Okay, notable exception, quiz. The final consonant is doubled in that case. For words that end in F or FE, change the F to V and simply add an ES. So this happens in words like life becomes lives, leaf becomes leaves, and wife becomes wives. The exception, there's always exceptions. A chef becomes chefs, and cliff is cliffs, belief is belief. So those do not, even though it ends in F, it does not turn to a V in its plural form. Okay, using IBL versus ABL, able versus able. Okay, when adding these suffixes to a sentence, the rule is if you take away the IBL or the ABL, is the root word a common English word? If so, then use able. So formable, if you take away able, form is still a regular English word. Workable, answerable, if you take away the ABLE, then it's still a regular English word. If the root word is not a common English word alone, then use IBLE. Here's some examples. So compatible, if you take away the IBL, compat isn't really a word that we use. Comprehensible, if you take away IBLE, comprehends is not a word that's part of the language. So you can see in these cases they have a Latin root word, and those ones take IBLE, where everything else that you can take ABLE. Now, there are some exceptions. Words like accessible, defensible, contemptible, digestible. These are some exceptions to that rule. If you take away IBLE and these exceptions, you still do have a regular English word. Okay, let's take a look at American versus British spelling. There is not a lot to say here other than the fact that some words are spelled differently in American English and British English. And here is a list of some common words, and it's just worth knowing about these and being aware of them. And here is a list of 75 commonly misspelled words. These are those words that maybe give you trouble, and you can go through and see if there are ones that give you trouble in particular, and maybe study those or pay a little bit more attention to those. Spelling is one of those aspects of writing that doesn't have a lot to do with what we would call good writing. I mean, you could be an excellent speller and a poor writer, or a poor speller and a great writer. But like it or not, it also is one of those things that's highly visible in your writing, and for better or worse, people will make judgments about the quality of your writing based on spelling, and it kind of gets in the way. It interferes with the content of your writing, of what you're trying to say. So if you're a bad speller, it is kind of a pain, but it is worth knowing some of the rules and being careful about this part of writing.